Real Talk, USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by Afro FM and Chris Meade of USAU. The show will air every Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk, USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.
Hello and welcome to RealTalk USA, your weekly program brought to you by USAU in partnership with Afro FM 105.3.
Kiram, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
This is Chris Meade, and welcome to our show, to all of our listeners. Kiram, I was in France last week, and it's good to be back here in Addis. How have you been doing?
It was all busy here. How was your time there in Paris?
It was really good. We learned a lot about countering violent extremism and some new, it was good to touch base. We had a lot of embassies from all over the continent, my counterparts at other embassies. So we were all touching base to talk about how we can collaborate on things moving forward. But we're not going to talk about CVE today. We are going to be talking about gender-based violence and sexual harassment.
Yeah.
As I think we've discussed before, we've recently kicked off about a week ago, 16 days of activism. And this is a period of time at the end of November and beginning of December where we in the international community and our development partners all begin to talk. We talk about the importance of gender equality and measures that we can take to improve the way that our organizations are run. If you're private sector, if you're public sector, how can we make sure that our workplaces are fair to everyone?
Yeah, it's timely to talk about gender-based violence. It's really pressing matter in Ethiopia and Africa at large.
Yeah. And nobody's perfect. We in the U.S. government, we've had issues. State Department has been pretty forward-leaning on certain things. But so we have a number of guests that we're going to be talking to from a sort of a wide variety of perspectives. And our first guest that we have on today is Matthew Emry. Matthew, welcome to Real Talk USA. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Matthew, you're calling in from Washington, D.C. You are with USAID's Africa Bureau. You've been with USAID's Africa Bureau since 2012. And you're a senior gender advisor. Can you tell us a little bit about what a senior gender advisor does?
So as a USAID Africa Bureau Senior Gender Advisor, I work across all of our technical portfolios, work with all of our offices, and work with all of our missions across Africa to ensure that we are using gender equality principles and practices within all of the development assistance that we do globally, certainly within Africa, to ensure that women's meaningful leadership, meaningful contributions, meaningful participation is truly considered, and that women's needs, girls' needs, are considered in all the work that we do.
Why is that important? I mean, it's kind of a stupid question, right? From you, why is it important that we think about these things?
Well, certainly, if we're talking about including an entire community, including all of the people, all of the resources, all of the ideas, all of the solutions to be able to address our most pressing development challenges, we have to include women and girls because they themselves will have different needs in many cases, or be faced with barriers based upon the inequality that they experience within the home and the community, within society. And so if we're not thinking about those needs, then our development programming won't address those particular needs won't ensure that they're getting equal benefit to the programs that we provide, and in some cases could potentially cause harm. So by engaging women, engaging girls, and for that matter engaging men and boys as well on some of those issues around gender equality and women's empowerment, we're more likely to have success, but also more likely to be able to ensure that the needs of everyone in the community are met.
Matthew, can you tell us a little bit about some of the problems that are out there? Why do we need a senior gender advisor? Like, what are some of the issues that women face in the workplace or in elsewhere?
Well, I mean, as we can certainly understand, in many parts of the world, women and girls are not treated equally. They aren't given equal opportunity, equal resources. They are demeaned by something as important as gender-based violence. And that's one of the reasons we actually have, internationally, the international community has 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And gender-based violence itself has immense impacts on the individuals who face it and on communities as well. Not only is it a human rights violation when women and girls in particular experience gender-based violence, but it also serves as a means to undermine and potentially even reverse the development efforts that we do. But within the workplace, it also just makes our workplace less productive. It prevents women from being able to contribute as meaningfully and as freely to the success of the organization in which they work. Everybody has a right to a work environment free of violence, and that includes freedom from sexual harassment.
So, yeah, look, I don't want to make too many presumptions. I mean, gender-based violence, the fact that the words, you might want to, I mean, some people might believe that the words say it all. What are exactly we talking about when we talk about gender-based violence? We're not just talking about, I mean, certainly rape is an issue. Certainly the violence, like when we talk about, domestic violence. What else is sort of within that umbrella of behavior that damages the ability of us to function appropriately in the workplace? Well,
gender-based violence is really an umbrella term for various forms of violence against women and girls, and for that matter against men and boys, depending upon the social context. So certainly intimate partner violence, domestic violence, rape, are forms of gender-based violence, but so can be female genital mutilation or child marriage or trafficking in women for sexual purposes. These are all various forms of gender-based violence. And the sexual harassment is also a form of gender-based violence that we are trying to more concretely tackle globally.
Okay, Matthew, so just so we're clear about we all think we know what sexual harassment is, but I want to make sure that we're clear about what we're talking about. Can you give us a general description of what sexual harassment is?
Sexual harassment can include unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature. Harassment does not have to be of a sexual nature, however, and can include offensive remarks about a person's sex. For example, it's illegal to harass a woman by making offensive comments about women in general. And, we certainly understand that both victim and a harasser can either be a woman or a man, and the victim and harasser can be the same sex.
How has USAID confronted the problem of sexual misconduct, whether it be sexual harassment or sexual assault or any other form of misconduct in the workplace? What are some of the approaches USAID has taken?
So USAID is committed to fostering a respectful, safe, healthy, and inclusive work environment. So our administrator, Mark Green, established what we call the Action Alliance for Preventing Sexual Misconduct, or the AAPSM. The AAPSM seeks to protect beneficiaries from sexual exploitation and abuse, and to prevent and address sexual harassment in our own workplace. And it is through the leadership of our Action Alliance for the Prevention of Sexual Misconduct that USAID is taking steps to ensure allegations of sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse are immediately identified, reported, and addressed, and that U.S. taxpayer funding is not perpetuating or supporting sexual misconduct. We are also working to ensure victims of misconduct know their rights and understand the appropriate means to address any concerns.
And can you discuss some of the programs that, like procedures or policies and practices that USAID has put into place that are intended to address these kinds of workplace challenges?
So with USAID's Action Alliance for the Prevention of Sexual Misconduct, we've been collaborating with donors and international organizations, implementing partners, non-governmental organizations, local organizations, and even our U.S. Congress to address sexual misconduct and harassment. USAID requires that staff hold ourselves and each other to the highest standards of professionalism to ensure a safe, inclusive, and protective work environment and culture. And so our Action Alliance for the Prevention of Sexual Misconduct is leading our agency on two pillar areas. The first is preventing workplace sexual harassment, and this means promoting zero tolerance of sexual misconduct and harassment at USAID by ensuring USAID has the necessary policies and procedures in place for effectively reporting on and responding to incidents of sexual harassment. It also means that we are fostering a culture at USAID that does not tolerate sexual misconduct or harassment and values reporting, respects survivors, and prevents retaliation by the accused. And we are demonstrating accountability to USAID employees and stakeholders through data-driven metrics. And secondly, we are also working to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. This means that we're developing policies and procedures to protect vulnerable populations and advance human dignity by preventing sexual exploitation and abuse across the globe. We're adhering to a principle of elevating the voice of survivors of sexual abuse and exploitation and putting their wishes, rights, dignity, and well-being at the forefront of our efforts. And we are also undertaking a review and revision of our existing policies and procedures to identify and close any potential gaps while strengthening accountability and compliance in consultation with our external partners.
Can we back up and say, you mentioned data-driven metrics. Can you describe what that means?
Sure. So, for example, one of the things we're doing right now is we're really trying to assess how many actual cases, incidents, reports of sexual harassment have there been within USAID, for example, or how many reports of sexual exploitation and abuse have there been within the aid community. And by better understanding those metrics and better understanding how we responded to those situations, we're able to better reevaluate our own policies and procedures to ensure that we are stronger moving forward.
Matthew, what are some of the at the most senior levels of any organization, I can imagine that leadership plays a big role in determining and kind of setting the tone and determining whether, a workplace is going to be a favorable place for everybody, or if it's a place where, people are afraid to report, or even in some cases probably even come to work. So can you describe what role can leaders play in stepping up and personally engaging to fix these problems? One
of the things we have discussed frequently within the Action Alliance is the importance of continued and sustained leadership at the highest levels on these issues. Research on organizational change shows that absent this, change management efforts will fail. So Administrator Mark Green has made these issues a priority from his earliest days at USAID. Our Action Alliance is also being led by USAID's acting deputy administrator and is supported by all USAID bureaus and missions. All of our missions conducted sessions on sexual misconduct in the spring with partners, including NGOs, contractors, and UN agencies. During our recent Mission Directors Conference, which included USAID leadership from around the world, we hosted a session specifically on managing issues of sexual misconduct based on real-life experiences. This session was inspired by consultations conducted with USAID mission directors and implementing partners around the world earlier this year, which pointed to the need for better training and tools for managers facing these issues. We also just recently released a manager's toolkit, which is available on the Action Alliance's public website, which you can actually find by going to USAID. And leadership in any organization or institution, such as at USAID, must remain committed to dedicating the time, effort, and resources needed to enable real change around these issues. So, for example, USAID is increasing its capacity to address sexual misconduct by hiring additional equal employment opportunity specialists and increasing investigative services. I myself am one of several committed staff who represent the Africa Bureau on the Action Alliance to develop stronger policies and procedures. And, leadership should certainly increase the awareness and utilization of existing policies and processes, but leadership should also encourage honest and thorough internal reviews of existing policies, procedures, tools, and resources around the issue of workplace sexual harassment, and pursue ways to reinforce existing protections and promote positive change.
Okay, can we back up a little bit? You mentioned the website. You can find it as something at USAID's website. What can you find there, and do you know what the address is for our listeners?
Yes, so the address is usaid.gov/preventing sexual misconduct.
And what can people find there?
Well, one, you'll find our vision statement and the particular steps that we are taking. You will learn about our efforts to prevent workplace sexual harassment at USAID and find information about preventing sexual exploitation and abuse amongst the aid community itself. I haven't been to the site in a while, but I think there's also a video there with our administrator talking about sexual harassment.
So, look, what recommendations would you make to organizations who are struggling to confront challenges and problems they're having with ethical conduct, like sexual harassment in the workplace? Not no organization is perfect, and so if there's someone out there listening, what immediate steps could they take in their workplace to make a positive difference?
Well, I would say that organizations need to explore different perspectives around how we can reframe the ways we think about and address risk around sexual misconduct, including harassment, exploitation, and abuse. As part of this shift, USAID is revisiting the way that we approach risk within this space. Gone are the days of reactive risk avoidance. Instead, we are moving toward a model of proactive awareness and prevention in partnership with our implementers that takes into account the real costs of sexual misconduct and puts human dignity at the forefront. So one challenge that USAID keeps coming back to, and the literature backs up, is the need to address systemic power imbalances within our own organization as well as the international aid community. When we approach international aid from a top-down approach without taking into account local systems and the empowerment of local entities, we reinforce existing power imbalances that drive sexual misconduct and other toxic behaviors.
Matthew, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think I understand what you're saying, but I wanted to make sure that I understand what is a systemic power imbalance?
So a systemic power imbalance, for example, could be one of two things, right? It could be that men are always in control and women are always disadvantaged. Now, obviously, that's not always the case. We certainly have lots of very strong women in leadership positions within the broader aid community and also at USAID itself. But when we think about gender inequality can find its way into just about everything that we do, including from policies to development work to even the way we engage on a one-on-one basis. When I mean we, I mean all of us globally, societally. So that is one form of that we're talking, that type of imbalance. And another is when we don't consider that aid recipients, that the community itself with whom we are partnering, are full and equal partners, and that they themselves should own and control the development efforts as we move forward in cooperation. And so when we really consult with and engage local stakeholders across all levels, we're more likely to be able to eliminate those power imbalances and work as partners rather than just as a donor-recipient type of environment.
Matthew, thank you so much. Look, I have one final follow-up question, and what would you say to somebody out there who's listening who is in a tough situation at work? I mean, what name the situation? I mean, maybe somebody is being pressured to offer sexual favors for trips or for promotions, or what is the average person in that situation supposed to do? What's a proactive way to handle that situation for the person that's in that, on the lower side of that power imbalance?
Well, first and foremost, I would say I would want to encourage anybody who's listening that if you yourself are facing sexual harassment at work, know that you are not at fault. The person who's at fault is the person who's harassing you. So never consider yourself too weak of a human being to be able to confront it. It does mean, however, that you might have to find a colleague or a supervisor, or if that supervisor is the person who's causing the problems, go to some office within your organization and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, and this is why it's causing me problems, and I would like it remedied. And assert your rights as an individual, that you have a right to work in a work environment free from all forms of violence, and that includes sexual harassment. So I guess my core message is know that you're not alone, that there are people like myself out there who are allies and want to be able to help create a less toxic environment, and that you are not at fault, and that we can work together to be able to find ways to address these issues systemically. Well,
Matthew Emry, thank you so much for joining us on Real Talk USA this week. We have been speaking with Matthew Emry from USAID's Africa Bureau, who is a senior gender advisor who helps build the capacity of USAID's Africa region to integrate gender equality principles and practices across all Africa portfolios. Matthew, thank you so much for being on Real Talk USA.
Thank you very much.
Real Talk USA.
Kiram, we're back with Real Talk USA. We're talking with Matthew about some of the measures that people have taken in USAID, which, as you know, is a huge development agency. It's a government organization in the United States and around the world. So we thought we'd give a little bit of a different perspective and talk to someone in the private sector. So we have Yolisa Kani on the line, who is head of public policy at Uber. Yolisa, welcome to Real Talk USA.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Very good. Okay. So, Yolisa, can you tell us a little bit? I think everyone knows what Uber is, but here in Ethiopia, we can't be too presumptuous. They have a program here called Ride, which I think is probably the closest equivalent to Uber. But can you just tell us a little bit about what Uber is? You guys were kind of trailblazers on ride sharing, yeah?
Yeah, look, I mean, Uber is a global app company. We started in 2010 in the US, and we then, South Africa was the next country outside of the US to have 3 cities starting at the same time, and that was in 2013. We're 5 years old in South Africa, and basically through technology, you are able to connect a rider and a public transport operators to each other so that people can take rides as seamlessly and as quickly as they can. That's the long and short of what we are and what we do.
Everybody who's Uber has, it's a great, I guess taxi drivers don't agree, but, for the consumer, and for people who want to get somewhere, Uber is this incredible company. But, I do understand you guys faced some issues recently. I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit about that and about what you guys have done to address the problem.
Yeah, it's something that we're very happy to talk about openly, but just as a bit of a background, we started off as a startup with 2 guys who were the founders, and within no time we're looking at 17,000 employees. Surely, whilst we're concentrating on building the business, there are certain things that are very fundamental to sustaining a business that we kind of missed. And this came out in February 2017, where a former engineer published a blog It was a blog post detailing allegations of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation during her employment at Uber, and the ineffectiveness of the company's then existing policies and procedures in terms of dealing with such cases. And this compelled us to really have a good look internally within ourselves in terms of, do we even know how to deal with these things? And when they come to the fore, do we have the right policies to support the complainant and take them through the paces to a point where they don't necessarily leave the company, but the perpetrators are dealt with? So it took a lot of work, but we also got an external service provider. And these are guys who are experts in the field, and we asked for their absolute honesty and independence. And basically, we asked them to look at our environment as it related to the allegations of discrimination and harassment. We asked them to look at our policies and whether policies and practices were sufficient to prevent and properly address discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. And the last step was what could we do to ensure that we are committed to a diverse and inclusive and as well as a safe environment for all that were with or still are within the company.
And so what were some of the findings?
Look, I mean, more than the findings, I mean, of importance, which I'd like to share with you, that we had 20 key senior managers leaving the organization as a result. Whether it was because of how they dealt with the situation or whether they were the ones who had meted out such actions towards employees, not just this one that wrote a blog post. So it was a serious cleanup. I mean, at that time, every Friday we used to receive an email to the effect of so-and-so was leaving, and it was based on these findings and the steps that we were taking as a company. That was the one part. Because what is important is that the leadership had to understand and appreciate the fact that we're no longer a startup company, but we're looking at 17,000 employees across the globe. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is we had to look at our cultural values, which probably made sense then when we were a startup, but no longer made sense when we were looking at 17,000 employees, black, blue, green, and with different cultural backgrounds, never mind racial backgrounds. So I mean, there's a whole lot more that we're still doing, including capacitating HR to know how to deal with these things to a point where people should feel safe to report such incidents. So it's a heck of a lot of things. I mean, the recommendations was about 13 of them, and I'm giving you just a few of the things that we implemented. Well, most importantly, we trained our senior managers and our executive team on diversity and inclusion as well as gender sensitivity, because if we don't get that at the top, then it's very difficult to then disseminate it through every other level within our organization.
So leadership is very important.
Extremely. I mean, they set the tone, they set the vision, which is, as you may know, this is probably one of the reasons we got into a mess, because when we started, we were so aggressive, we're doing things in a way that is unconventional, and we just wanted to grow the business. And everyone kind of thought that that's the way to do things, but they don't. You go through various stages of an organization that at some point, when you've gotten to a point of 17,000 employees, you need to know for a fact that just growing the business is not going to sustain us.
You've mentioned the 17,000. Are those your drivers as well? Or are they?
No. Drivers, we don't term them as our employees. That's just us, employees of the organization. Yes, globally.
And so, look, some of the policies. So you did a major house cleaning. It sounds like you started at the top and started pushing some people out the door. And you did some sensitivity training, and you trained people on sexual harassment policies. Are there other things that a company can do to make sure that they are creating a gender discrimination-free workplace?
Yeah, I mean, look, let me be honest. It starts with acknowledging that there's a problem, because you can't fix something when you don't know that you have a problem. And it then goes to acknowledging that something has got to give. You need to change. But most importantly, when I was just looking at this from an outside and listening to what everyone was saying, they were watching this with a hawk's eye to say, are we just going to be letting go of senior managers and that becomes the beginning and the end of it? Or are we going to see real change? And this is how we then started our diversity and inclusion initiative, where we formed various committees ranging from women engineers to Uber parenting to Uber Hue, because I'm based in South Africa. South Africa has got 11 official languages. That on its own is complex. Then you go to Latin America, that's something else. Then you go to the US. So it was very important that we get to live and walk the talk when it comes to diversity and inclusion, which is not an easy subject to deal with because we've got different points of references.
True.
Even I don't have the same point of reference as my black colleague who comes from a different culture. And post 1994, which was our democratic year, we've had to go through that painful exercise of understanding that unless I know and I've walked a mile in your shoes, then I don't really know what this is about. And this cuts across transgender, it cuts across women, black women, white women, it cuts across a whole bunch. It's very complex, it's very sophisticated. We still haven't gotten it right, but I mean, we've taken the first steps that I think have brought us to a point of some form of stability and a level of comfort for people to know that if I report this, something will be done.
So let me ask this question. It sounds like a stupid question on its face, and maybe it's clear why women would want there to be these kinds of protections in the workplace and for managers to take it seriously. Not talking about managers, but talking about the average male employee at any organization. Why should they care about this question?
Which is gender sensitivity.
Yes.
It's a no-brainer. And this problem doesn't start at work, by the way. People come with these things. They come with certain behavioral patterns that they've learned from their environment. And at some point, the chain has got to be broken. And it's about having those frank discussions to say that you may not be the perpetrator, but somebody else might victimize your own daughter. If you don't have one, you might have one in the future. So it's everyone's responsibility to change the culture. And changing the culture doesn't mean you wait until it happens to you. This is our daily discussion because this is a chain that it has not been broken for the longest of time. I'm a South African, and the rape culture in South Africa is so high that our next level of discussion is with our driver partners to say, you drive women all the time. We've done a research where women are saying, I am riding with Uber because I feel relatively safe, and we should lead to that value. So it's important that no problem sorts itself out unless all of us collectively acknowledge that it's a joint effort. Otherwise, it will be 10 years down the line and we're still talking about the same thing. They should care. It's an environment where all of us are supposed to thrive equally. It's an environment where all of us are supposed to empathize with each other. I mean, I empathize with the LGBTI team. I truly do. But unless you dig deep and you get to understand why things are the way they are, and not that anyone owes you any explanation about the choices they've made in life, but when it comes to work and society, those are our places where we spend a lot of our time, and therefore it's important that we have this open. If you don't get it, eventually you will get it. But you can't get it if you don't have a conversation about it.
Right. So what would you say to a manager out there who wants to begin that conversation? Where should they start?
Look, you start with listening, especially at a managerial level where you've probably seen a whole bunch of things and you've taken a whole bunch of discussions that are strategic, that grow the business. But when it comes to this subject, you need to listen. You need to receive what people are saying just for a while, because unless you know and you've heard what people are struggling with, it becomes very difficult to commit yourself to create an environment that helps people to thrive, in an environment that has less of these issues than we're currently having, and not just at Uber, by the way, just in our society. The second thing is, these are not easy discussions. You will find yourself landing in a position where male are feeling like they're being victimized because now they are male and they didn't ask to be born males. We know all of that, but we also didn't ask to be born females, and we are sick and tired of being discriminated on those bases. But you'll find a single parent who's a male who's saying, can I be acknowledged that I'm a parent? I may not have given birth to this child to an extent that our male counterparts have got maternity leave or paternity leave that I've never seen anywhere else in South Africa for that matter, where you are able to take time off for 18 weeks to support your wife and be there for your child. So for me, it's very important that we listen and we dig deeper as well, because nothing happens in a vacuum. The society is very broken, whether it's broken in America or it's broken in South Africa, and there's the reason why it is broken, so we need to know what we are solving for as well. But I mean, most importantly, I just want people to know that these are not easy conversations, and it's not things that, it's not a black and white document. You may have the best of policies, but if you don't know how to implement them, that policy is useless.
So I got one final question for you. If there's a young woman out there, or a young man out there who is being harassed at work, do you have any practical advice for them? Like what should they do?
Report it. They must report it. If they don't have mechanisms within the organization, there's got to be a mechanism outside the organization, because you don't want to be sitting 4 years down the line and struggling in your own little corner, and then people asking you, why did you wait for 4 years? That adds on to the trauma, that adds on to the bad experience. You have to report it, get it out of your system, get it out of your chest. Nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to the most intelligent people. It happens to just about everyone. The weird thing about this thing is that it doesn't discriminate. It knows no boundaries.
Yolisa Kani is head of public policy at Uber South Africa. Yolisa, thank you so much for being on Real Talk USA today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys, for your time. I hope I was of help.
Real Talk USA.
I'm Patrick Brady of the U.S. Mission to the African Union, and this is Afro FM. It's Real Talk USA on Afro FM, and I'm talking with Olyinlola Osinubi. Ms. Osinubi is a human resource executive with almost 20 years of experience in a range of fields: financial services, ICT, and the power sector. She is currently the head of the Organizational Development Department at Echo Electricity PLC, which is a electricity distribution company. Part of her responsibility at the company is the initiation and development and implementation of initiatives and policies that promote best practices and consistency across the entire company. I should also mention that in addition to her experience, Ms. Osinubi has a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Relations and Personnel Management from the University of Lagos in Nigeria, which is where Echo is located. She holds an MBA from Lagos State University as well. And then finally, she most recently concluded a one-year Gender Equity Executive Leadership course from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., a business executive education program.
Patrick, welcome to Real Talk USA as you are co-hosting with me today. Yeah, we were talking about 16 days of activism with our other guests. I would like to welcome Madam Olyinlola.
Yes, so as Kiram said, we've just come through 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and a colleague of ours in the U.S. government in USAID pointed out that there were some terrific programs across Africa, across the continent, and that the one that Echo had initiated was very interesting, and we wanted to hear a little bit more from you. It sort of, I think, focuses on gender equity, workplace conduct, ethics, and ethical behavior in the workplace. So with that, let me just kind of ask you a little bit more about how you and Echo have worked to promote this kind of environment, an inclusive environment, a positive workplace. Can you tell us a little bit about how Echo became kind of a leader, a private sector leader, in terms of gender equity and inclusiveness in the workplace?
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick, and your team. The power sector in Nigeria is a male-dominated sector. I'm sure you're aware of that because of the nature of the business. And we have a great number of male staff compared to female. Now, as the HR department, the onus is on us to ensure that we create a balance between these gender. Before we met with the USAID team, we had started some work on that, but it was intensified when the partnership with USAID kicked off. That was USAID and USEA. when it kicked off in 2015 on gender equity. And I think that shed more light on the reality of gender imbalance in the sector as a whole, because we're able to meet with several other people. Now, how have we worked with USAID? Because I would say we can't talk about gender balance in ECHO without talking about USAID. The first thing that we did was working on our policies, making our policies a bit gender sensitive. We started that I joined ECHO in 2017, and I think 2 years before that they had already started some plans. They had some plans which had not sprung up. So I picked up from there and we started working on these policies. We're talking about policies like sexual harassment. We're talking about our whistleblowing policy, because we also found out that outside the head office, most of our staff who are field workers also have their issues, but they never have the opportunity to get heard. So what we did was to get in touch with we formed the committee, management formed the committee, and we drew up that whistleblowing policy, which I think so far has helped. People can actually, without being known, can send in their complaints, can send in their issues. We formed a few committees here and there where people can also talk to their fellow colleagues about the kind of issues that they're having. So I think policy formulation really helped with us. And then management buy-in. You can't do a lot of this without your management's buy-in. So management's buy-in from inception also helped us.
So you mentioned sexual harassment. You, of course, have the whistleblower policy, which you've put in place. Are there some kinds of things that ECHO as a company, under both your leadership, maybe in the executive's leadership, have done in the way of sensitizing people before the problem comes to bear, before we have a case where there is a whistle that's being blown? Is there some kind of effort in this regard?
Yes. Okay. The first thing we did was we had campaigns. Immediately those policies were approved, we actually had a company-wide campaign. Now, another thing that we noticed would work was that to ensure that those people who managed those campaigns, who managed the workshops that we also had, were not junior staff. They were management staff. So you'd find head of departments going to different districts, going to talk to them about the policies, going to talk to them. And then we had things like knowledge sharing sessions in the head office and outside the head office also, just to ensure that people know that if this happens to you, this is what you should do. And the company is watching your back. And in order to avoid this happening to you, this is what you should do, especially when it comes to sexual harassment and the likes. So I think what really did work for us was the opportunity to ensure that these policies are shared with staff in different channels. That's it, just to create enlightenment. So that really worked for us, and we started from the grassroots, and that's the districts.
You've talked a little bit about some of the strides that you've made. What areas have you, as a company, let's say, struggled with, and you still want to overcome, kind of on a forward-looking basis over the next year or two? Have you thought about some of those things as a firm, how to even get better at addressing this problem?
Yes. Okay, I talked about harassment. Now, let's even take out the sexual harassment aspect of it. Also, because we're a utility company, we're customer facing, most of our customers are out there. They don't need to walk into the building because we serve them. Now, we have quite a number of our staff who would go out just to perform their daily duties, and they're beaten up. So this is a major concern for us because it still happens till date. So what has management done? We just looked at it. You know what? We need to also place ads to let people know that the organization frowns at this, and we go all the way to prosecute whoever it is we find wanting. So we have adverts all out there. For us, it's a major concern because that dovetails into energy theft. That's the reason why our staff would go out and ask questions and probe And these same people are the ones that would go violent on the staff, because the next thing that happens is a disconnection. If you're owing, if we see that you've tampered with our meter, tampered with the lines, we do have to disconnect you, and then we have chaos. So it happens on day-to-day basis, and we're hoping that we'll be able to manage this. Yes, the sensitization to our customers is out there, and I think it's reducing, but we want it to get to the barest minimum, because the worst thing that can happen to anyone who's working as a 9 to 5 and then you go out to do your job and then you get beaten up by your customers just because you're doing your job. So I'll say the adverts that we've placed out for this main reason, I think so far that has helped us.
Let me also ask about you're a leader in this sector, both in terms of of electricity distribution, but also in terms of some of the things that you've done within the company, the Gender Equity Executive Program. But have other firms and companies in Nigeria asked you for assistance and try to better understand what kinds of things you're doing so that they might scale some of these things up in the companies that they are managing?
Yes, we have. Okay, we're not the only utility company in Nigeria. There are several other utility companies, but there's a body called ANET. ANET has quarterly meetings with all discos in Nigeria. And at these meetings, we've had 2 or 3 opportunities to talk to our colleagues, because only 2 discos actually had the opportunity to work with USAID and Georgetown University. So we have the opportunity to share with them all that we're able to gather in our 9 months to 12 months with USAID, that's during the course, just to enlighten them. And I know that they also wished that quite a number of discourse actually wished that they were part of the entire program, but obviously not everybody could be in it. So what we just did was we had different sessions with them, about 3 different sessions, just to share with them what we learned over the period that we were in school at Georgetown University, and how it has helped us as an organization.
Thank you so much. My final question is, what recommendations do you have? You've been operating in this field as a human resource professional and as somebody who has been coping with these challenges both internally and externally. What kinds of recommendations, or if there were one recommendation for senior leaders, both in the public sector and private sector, that are senior leaders in large companies, businesses, and institutions that will inevitably have to struggle with this problem, what recommendation would you have?
Okay, I'll use what has worked for us as our recommendation, and then also what has worked for other people that we're also hoping to work with. First of all, management buy-in is key. Any organization who's going to run this, or who's going to focus, any organization that wants to focus on this, must have the management team's buy-in. Now, the first thing that guides us here are policies, ensuring that our policies are gender friendly. So it's not like we're making any major change, but we're just going through the policies to see, okay, is there any form of bias when it comes to recruitment? Is there any form of bias when it comes to majorly most of our policies? We had to go through dress code policies and co. Is there any type of bias, just to ensure that there is a balance of some sort? Because here you will find out most of our staff are male. And then we also, creation of channels of enlightenment. If you know the organization you work with, you know the team to actually start with. With the kind of organization that we run, we knew that going to the grassroots, to the foot soldiers, would be the first thing to do. So most of our knowledge sharing sessions, our campaigns, we took out to the district and ensured that we had senior staff handle these campaigns, just to ensure that we have their buy-in. We needed them to know that we understood what was going on in the field, and we are working towards ensuring that their backs are being worked.
Olyinlola, Osinubi, thank you very much. This has been Real Talk USA on Afro FM, and we thank you again for your time and your insights. This is an important issue. We've been talking with you and with the head of public policy in South Africa for Uber, and with senior gender advisor for the Africa Bureau in USAID in Washington. We appreciate everyone's time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much.
With that, we conclude Real Talk USA for today. I thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure hosting the show with Chris Mead and with you, Kidim. We look forward to having more of these conversations. This issue is certainly one that isn't going away.
Indeed.
Real Talk USA. Real Talk USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by Afro FM and Chris Mead of USAU. The show will air every Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.